So the Supreme Court recently issued a 5-4 order, which has completely shaken up our country and is creating a battle between the state of Texas and the Biden administration. So let's talk about what is happening. But real quick, before we jump into this video, I want to ask you guys for a huge favor. I'm not going to put a sponsor on this video because of the topic we're dealing with. But if you guys appreciate this content, if you want to support this channel, please consider subscribing to the channel. About 60% of all my viewers are not actually subscribed to the channel. So again, support what we're doing here, like, comment, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for all of your support. As I mentioned in the intro, we need to talk about the recent 5-4 order, which was issued by the US Supreme Court, which involves the Texas border dispute. This order by the Supreme Court not only has implications and impacts on all of us in this nation, but it also shines a major and significant light on the current Supreme Court, what their current position is, and what potentially is going to happen going forward on critical issues involving other issues like the Second Amendment. The case we're going to be talking about in this video is the Department of Homeland Security versus the state of Texas. This is a topic that everybody's talking about right now. It's all over the news. And this is a battle over border security in the recent Supreme Court 5-4 order, which has essentially made national news and has a lot of people talking about what is going to happen going forward. And there's a lot of concern right now for our country and just the border issue in general. Recently, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas reacted to the Supreme Court order by issuing a letter to the Biden administration outlining that the state of Texas has a right to self-defense under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. And the governor essentially makes the claim that despite that Supreme Court order, the Biden administration has failed to fulfill their duties to protect the state of Texas against an invasion. And therefore, him and the state of Texas are engaging in their own self-defense and are going to continue in this action. This has set up a significant clash between a state and the Biden administration, along with a clash between the state of Texas and also the Supreme Court because of their recent order. Now, we need to do some background on this case so that you understand what the Supreme Court's recent order was, what it did, and just generally what is going on with this issue. The recent Supreme Court order that everybody's talking about, that 5-4 order, involves overruling a preliminary injunction which was granted by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. It was a 3-judge panel order. The Fifth Circuit panel's decision prevented the United States Border Patrol from cutting, destroying, or otherwise interfering with sea wire that the state of Texas had put up along 29 miles of municipal land and then private land in the Eagle Pass area. In this case, Texas originally sued the federal government, essentially the U.S. government and the Biden administration, in a Texas federal district court alleging trespass in violations of the Administrative Procedures Act, also known as the APA. Originally in the lower court case, Texas requested that the court grant a temporary restraining order. On review, the district court granted the TRO in favor of Texas and essentially barred the government from interfering with the sea wire that was in the area except for medical emergencies. Texas also later sought a preliminary injunction which would simply prevent Border Patrol from being able to cut the sea wire while the case was making its way through the process and went to a merit review in the lower court. Now, if you're not aware of what a TRO is and what a preliminary injunction is, let me explain real quick. A TRO is a temporary protection mechanism that a party can seek from a court. The standard to be granted a TRO is similar to the standard for obtaining a preliminary injunction, things like a likelihood of success on the merits, irreparable harm, and things like that. The standard to be granted a TRO, again, is similar, but the type of protection that you get is different. The primary difference between a TRO and a preliminary injunction has to do with the duration of time. A TRO, since it's a temporary restraining order, typically is in place only for 14 days or a limited time. Think of a TRO as simply a mechanism that puts a temporary halt on something, and it's just a placeholder for a court to maintain the status quo until a hearing for a preliminary injunction can take place. That's why a preliminary injunction is a little bit more significant. A preliminary injunction, in contrast to a TRO, is granted and then remains in force and effect throughout the entire duration of a case. A preliminary injunction is used to maintain the status quo of the law while a case is making its way through the process and is being decided by a judge. In this case, the lower court granted the TRO, but then later on review decided and ultimately denied the request for a preliminary injunction. What was interesting about the lower court denial was the fact that the judge agreed with Texas on multiple issues, including the fact that the government was cutting the wire and was generally not necessary to prevent medical emergencies, which was one of the big arguments that the government was making for why they needed to cut this wire. The court rejected the notion that medical emergencies could justify the destruction of a fence of the sea wire, and that cutting the wire for one single emergency, maybe one person, does not then justify leaving that open for thousands of people to go through. Despite all of that, the lower court judge there denied Texas's request for a preliminary injunction. Now, in response to that, Texas then quickly appealed that denial of the preliminary injunction up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which reviews all these issues that come out of the lower court there in Texas. Along with that appeal request, Texas sought an emergency injunction pending the appeal in the Fifth Circuit. Essentially, what happened is Texas appealed the denial to the Fifth Circuit and at the same time asked for the Fifth Circuit to grant an injunction pending the appeal, which simply means that they wanted to maintain the status quo of the case until the Fifth Circuit reviews the entire case. The Fifth Circuit ultimately granted the injunction pending the appeal, which again is simply a temporary placeholder, gives the Fifth Circuit time to review the case and just maintains the status quo while they're reviewing the appeal. So this whole dispute that the Supreme Court got involved in and reviewed isn't even the Fifth Circuit granting a true preliminary injunction. Instead, all the hoopla in this issue in this case is over a temporary injunction that the Fifth Circuit granted to maintain the status quo in Texas while the review is going on in this case and while the appeal is making its way through the process. Now, as we stated, the government then sought an emergency application in the Supreme Court. Essentially, they asked for the Supreme Court to step in early and vacate the Fifth Circuit's injunction, which maintained the status quo while the appeal is happening in the Fifth Circuit. And on review, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a 5-4 order, which granted the government's request to vacate that injunction pending appeal, which the Fifth Circuit had granted. And the order of the U.S. Supreme Court simply states that application to vacate injunction presented to Justice Alito and by him referred to the court is granted. The December 19th, 2023 order of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit is vacated. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh would deny the application to vacate injunction. So that is the order, the 5-4 order, which everybody is talking about. It's not a full opinion. It's nothing like that. Instead, it is a simple order by the Supreme Court, a 5-4 order that says that they are going to vacate what the Fifth Circuit did. But really what this means is ultimately the Supreme Court voted in favor of removing the temporary injunction that the Fifth Circuit put in place, which maintained the status quo. That effectively means that the Supreme Court is allowing the lower court's denial of the injunction to go in place. Essentially, in a backdoor way, the U.S. Supreme Court voted and essentially removed the restriction on the Border Patrol, which barred them from cutting sea wire in those specific areas. And the two judges who jumped the line, who jumped to the other side, were Justice Barrett and then also Chief Justice Roberts. In reaction to that Supreme Court 5-4 order, Governor Abbott in Texas did issue a letter to the Biden administration, which went pretty much viral on the internet, and everybody was talking about it. The letter states that the federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. He went on to state in this letter that the failure of the Biden administration to fulfill the duties imposed by Article 4, Section 4 has triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which reserves to this state the right of self-defense. For those reasons, I have already declared an invasion under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. The Texas National Guard, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and other Texas personnel are acting on the authority as well as state law to secure the Texas border. Governor Abbott then called in the Texas National Guard to secure the area and is preventing Border Patrol from cutting the wire which is being disputed. In response to that, the Biden administration gave the state of Texas 24 hours, which is now up, saying that he is giving them time to allow Border Patrol into the area to cut the wire. That I believe has not happened yet. There were rumors that Biden was potentially interested in federalizing the National Guard, which is at issue here. And also, there have been sanctions which are being, I believe, levied against the state of Texas in regards to oil. Border Patrol unions in the area have come out to support Governor Abbott. And then there also have been multiple states, 25 states, which have written a letter in support of Governor Abbott's actions. And on the other side, Biden and his administration in multiple states are calling for punishments against Texas, sanctions and other things against the state of Texas. This is something I think everyone will be watching closely going forward because it really does have broad-reaching implications for our country. A lot of people are concerned about this specific issue, what could come out of this, especially during this election year. So I wanted to give you guys additional context on what the Supreme Court did, what this lawsuit was, and potentially what could happen going forward. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you found this helpful, please share it to other people. I know we talk a lot about the 2A here on this channel, but I thought this would be a video that a lot of people will get value out of, especially because it's something that's circulating around the news a lot right now. A lot of you have been asking me to cover this topic. I was asked multiple times at SHOT Show about this case, about what was happening. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I will try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.